Welcome to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. Welcome back, my friend, to episode 15 of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Today, we're going to tackle one of the most frustrating challenges in creating a kinder world: dealing with difficult colleagues at work. You know what I'm talking about. Those colleagues who seem to thrive on stirring up drama, spreading negativity, and making everyone around them miserable. Let me tell you about a former colleague who I'll call Marcus. This dude was on the Mount Rushmore of difficult colleagues. Marcus had this super annoying habit of showing up late to every team meeting, interrupting people mid-sentence, and then criticizing their ideas in front of everyone. But here's the kicker. Whenever someone called him out on his behavior, he'd act completely innocent. "What? I'm just trying to help us be more efficient." Or, "I was just asking questions to make sure we thought this through." For months, our entire team walked on eggshells around Marcus. People stopped sharing ideas because they're afraid of being shot down. Meetings became tense and unproductive. And the worst part, management seemed oblivious to how one person was poisoning the entire team dynamic. Sound familiar? I bet that you have your own Marcus story. In my book, Making Work Work, I refer to people like Marcus as agitators. These are the people who upset and disturb the workplace culture with rudeness, passive aggressiveness, and incivility. They're the ones who steal credit for your work. They're habitually rude and condescending. They criticize you in front of others, and somehow they always have an excuse for their poor behavior. Here's what I've learned. We cannot create a kinder workplace if we don't know how to effectively deal with these people. And the good news, you have more power than you think to handle these situations with grace and with effectiveness. And in today's episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to deal with the most common workplace agitators. So whether you're dealing with a colleague who constantly interrupts you, a boss who takes credit for your ideas, or a team member who is constantly passive aggressive, this episode will give you concrete tools to simultaneously protect your peace while maintaining your professionalism. If you're ready for the practical strategies to stop workplace agitators in their tracks, this is the episode for you. No need to delay, my friend. Let's dive in. For the first kind of strategy of the episode, whenever I'm dealing with agitating behavior at work, I always turn to what I call the workplace version of the Serenity prayer. You've probably heard of it before. Grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This simple framework has saved my sanity more times than I can count. Because real talk, not every agitating behavior requires a response from us. Sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do is absolutely nothing. Let me give you a real example. Very early in my career, I worked with someone, let's call him Dave, who had serious mood swings. One day, he'd be friendly and collaborative, and then the next day, he'd be snippy and condescending. His emotional roller coaster was exhausting for everyone on the team. At first, I tried everything to manage Dave's moods. I'd walk on eggshells around him, trying to predict what version of Dave would show up each day. I'd take his bad moods personally, and I'd let them ruin my day. I even tried talking to him about it, which unfortunately only made things worse. I finally had a breakthrough moment. I realized that Dave's emotional state had absolutely nothing to do with me and everything to do with whatever was going on in his personal life. More importantly, there was literally nothing I could do to change his mood swings. That's when I chose acceptance. Not acceptance that said, "This is fine," because it wasn't fine, but acceptance that said, "This is reality, and I'm going to stop wasting my energy fighting against something I cannot control." Yes, it would have been lovely if Dave had the self-awareness and the ability to effectively manage his moods, but both were outside of my control. And instead of me living on planet what should be, I decided to take residence in planet what is. And what is that Dave is struggling to manage his moods for whatever reason. Here's how to apply the simple philosophy in your own workplace. First, identify what you cannot change. I'll help you with this. You cannot change other people's personalities, their work ethic, their communication style, or their emotional intelligence. You also cannot change company policies that you disagree with or organizational decisions that frustrate you. You also cannot change your boss's management style or make difficult colleagues suddenly become pleasant. When you're dealing with these unchangeable realities, fighting against them is like trying to stop the rain by yelling at the clouds. It's exhausting and completely ineffective. I'd advise grabbing an umbrella instead. Or in other words, locking in on what you actually have the power to control. Second, practice true acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean that you like the situation or that you think that it's cool. It simply means that you're going to stop wasting your precious and finite mental and emotional energy fighting against reality. When Dave was in one of his moods, instead of taking it personally or trying to fix it, I would think, Dave is having a rough day. This has nothing to do with me. I'm going to stay locked in on my own work and my energy. This shift was incredibly liberating. I stopped dreading interactions with Dave because I wasn't taking responsibility for his emotional state anymore. And third, redirect your energy towards what you can control. When you stop fighting the unchangeable, you are freeing up enormous amounts of energy to focus on what you can actually influence. You can control a response to difficult people. You can control your own attitude and energy. You can control how much you let other people's behavior affect your peace of mind. With Dave, I focus on maintaining my own professionalism regardless of his mood. I stayed consistent in my interactions with him, kind, professional, and focused on work. I didn't match his energy when he was negative, and I didn't take credit for it when he was positive. However, because we are operating in the real world, I must acknowledge that acceptance is not always the answer. There are certain things that you shouldn't accept, and in those cases, you absolutely should speak up and take action. The key is knowing when you're dealing with something you can actually change. You can potentially change situations when, for example, someone's behavior directly impacts your ability to do your job, or when the agitator might not be genuinely aware of how their actions affect others, or you have a reasonable relationship with the person and they've shown that they can receive feedback, or the behavior violates clear workplace policies or standards. For example, if a colleague consistently interrupts you in meetings, that's something that you should address. If someone takes credit for your work, you should speak up about that too. If a team member is consistently late and it affects project deadlines, it doesn't make sense to sit in silence. Like the Serenity prayer says, the wisdom comes in knowing the difference. Ask yourself, is this something that I can reasonably influence through my words or actions, or am I fighting against an unchangeable reality? So here's the first kind of strategy of the episode. For the next week, practice something that I like to call the acceptance versus action assessment. When someone's behavior agitates you, pause and ask yourself, is this something that I can reasonably change through my response, or do I need to accept this reality and focus my energy elsewhere? Write down 3 workplace frustrations you're currently dealing with, this probably shouldn't be too hard, and categorize them either as accept or action. You'll be amazed at how much mental energy you free up when you stop fighting the unchangeable battles. Next, for those situations where action is the right choice, let's talk about how to take that action effectively. For the second kind of strategy of the episode, when you've determined that a situation calls for action, the way you communicate makes all the difference between resolving the issue or making it worse. Most people swing between 2 extremes, being aggressive, which creates more conflict, or being passive, which doesn't solve anything. The sweet spot is assertive communication, standing up for yourself in a positive and respectful way. This is a learnable skill, and I want to teach you a simple framework that has worked for me. Picture this hypothetical but very common situation. Let's say you're working on a project with a colleague who has a habit of taking credit for team accomplishments. Super annoying, I know. During a presentation to senior leadership, she presented your joint research as if she had done all the work herself. You're sitting right there, listening to her take full credit for the ideas that you had contributed, and you're getting heated. You can feel it. At this point, there are 3 ways that you could respond to the situation. First, you could choose the passive response. In other words, say nothing, swallow your frustration, and hope it doesn't happen again. Maybe complain to your significant other about it after work or vent to a friend, but avoid any direct confrontation. This might feel easier in the moment, but it doesn't solve the problem. And worse, it actually encourages the behavior to continue. Second, you could choose the aggressive response. interrupt the presentation and say something like, "Excuse me, those were my ideas too. You just can't take credit for the work we did together. What in the hell's wrong with you, lady?" Like eating a bacon-covered donut, this would probably feel amazing in the moment, but you will definitely regret it later. In other words, not only would this outburst be embarrassing for you and for everyone involved, but it would also damage your working relationship with this colleague and anyone who witnessed your outburst. Or third, you could choose the assertive response. Wait until after the meeting and ask to meet with her privately and address the issue directly, but respectfully. Hopefully, since you're listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast, the assertive option is the one that's the most appealing to you. If so, here's the framework I use, and it's one you can apply to almost any workplace situation. Here's a two-step assertive communication model. First, respectfully and clearly state the facts of the problem, and then two, ask the person to take action to solve the problem. Super simple. So continuing with this hypothetical scenario, here's exactly what you could say. "Sarah, in today's presentation, you presented our joint research without mentioning my contributions to the project. This damages my professional reputation and makes it appear that I didn't contribute value to this important initiative. Going forward, can you please ensure that team contributions are acknowledged when presenting our work?" Here's what's so cool about this, my friend. You stated the facts without attacking our character, you explained the impact on you, and you made a clear request for change. You didn't call her selfish or accuse her of trying to steal credit. You simply described what happened and asked for what you needed. Let me give you another example of this framework in action, showing you the passive, aggressive, and assertive options. For example, let's say that you're dealing with a chronic interrupter. You know what I'm talking about. The passive response would be to say nothing when interrupted, just stop talking and let them take over. The aggressive response would be like, "Hey, you're so rude. You never let anyone finish a sentence and you're always giving main character energy. Zip your lips, man. Damn." The assertive response, on the other hand, would be something like this. "You've interrupted me twice while presenting my ideas. This makes it really difficult for me to contribute effectively to our discussions. Can you please let me finish my thoughts before responding?" Okay, you get the point. Assertive communication is what we're going for here. Here are the key principles that make assertive communication work. First, focus on behavior, not the person. Don't say, "You're disorganized." Say, "The project timeline has changed 3 times this week." Don't say, "You're rude." Say, "I was interrupted 4 times during my presentation." Second, use I statements to explain impact. "I feel frustrated when," or "I'm having difficulty completing my work when," or "I need clarity about." This keeps the focus on the impact rather than attacking the person. Third, make specific, actionable requests. Don't just complain about what's wrong, ask for exactly what you need. For example, "Can you please send me the agenda 24 hours before our meetings?" Or, "Would you be willing to give me your feedback by Friday so we can incorporate it?" Fourth, and this one's hard, stay calm and professional. If you're visibly angry or emotional, unfortunately, the other person will focus on your emotional state rather than your message. At this point, I know what you might be thinking. All right, this is cool and all, but how does this work if you're doing this with your boss? The good news, the principles are totally the same, but you're going to want to err on the softer side of assertiveness. For example, you could say to your boss, "I want to make sure that I'm meeting your expectations. When priorities change multiple times within a day, I'm struggling to deliver quality work on any of them. And as mentioned, I really want to meet your expectations. Can we just establish a process for prioritizing urgent requests so I can be the most effective?" My friend, here's the second kind of strategy of the episode. Identify one agitating behavior that you need to address this week. Write out your assertive response using the 2-step model. State the facts and then make a specific request. Practice saying it out loud until it feels natural, then have the conversation within the next 3 days. I'm not half-stepping, within the next 3 days. Remember, assertive communication gets easier with practice. Start with smaller issues to build your confidence and then work your way up to bigger challenges. Now let's tackle the most challenging type of difficult workplace behavior, passive aggressiveness. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. It's time for the third kind of strategy of the episode. Let's be real. Passive aggressive behavior is the grand master of all agitator behaviors. And if you've ever dealt with it, you know how frustrating it can be. These are the people who express their anger indirectly through sarcasm, silent treatment, backhanded compliments, or deliberate forgetfulness. The tricky thing about these folks is that passive aggressive people never own their behavior. If you call them out, they'll act innocent. What? I was just kidding. Or, I don't know what you're talking about. This makes you feel like you're going crazy. Let me tell you about a former colleague who I'll call Jessica. This woman was the queen of passive-aggressive behavior. She had this talent for making cutting remarks disguised as jokes. It was so annoying. For example, she once said in front of the whole team, "Oh, Shola's presenting today? Well, this should be interesting. Hopefully it goes better than his last presentation." She'd immediately follow up with, "I'm just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." But unfortunately, the damage was done. She undermined my confidence and my credibility in front of my colleagues while maintaining plausible deniability. For months, I didn't know how to respond to her. One, if I defended myself, I looked defensive and proved her point about me being sensitive. On the other hand, if I said nothing, she continued the behavior. It was absolutely crazy making stuff. It took a lot of time and research, but I finally found the secret to dealing with passive-aggressive behavior. Don't give them what they want. Passive-aggressive people are trying to get an emotional reaction from you. They want you to get upset, defensive, or angry because it gives them power and allows them to play the victim. When you refuse to take their bait, you remove their power. Here are 3 strategies that work so well with passive-aggressive people. First, use the "I don't get it" response. When Jessica made one of her sarcastic comments, instead of getting defensive, I started responding with genuine confusion. For example, one time I walked into a meeting and she said, "Someone open a window because there's going to be a lot more hot air in the room now." I looked her in the eye as I grabbed my seat and asked, "I don't get it. What do you mean by that?" This forces them to either explain their passive-aggressive comment, which makes them look incredibly dumb, or they'll back down entirely. It worked brilliantly in that situation. Second, take them at their word. If someone says, "I was just kidding," you can respond with, "Oh, good to hear that. I'm glad that you were joking. So we're in agreement that my presentation went well." This technique is called positive reframing, and it takes their negative comment and flips it into something positive. It's beautiful. Or third, stay factual and unemotional. Passive-aggressive people thrive on emotional reactions. So when you respond calmly with facts instead of emotion, you deflate their strategy. For example, if one of your colleagues passive-aggressively says, "Nice of you to finally join us," when you actually arrive on time to the meeting, your response could be, "Thanks. It looks like I'm right on time for our 2 p.m. meeting." The key is never to match their energy. Stay professional, stay calm, and refuse to get pulled into their emotional games. I want to share one more powerful technique, the direct address. Sometimes you need to address passive-aggressive behavior head-on using our assertive communication framework. For example, "Jessica, when you make comments about my presentations in front of the team, it undermines my credibility and it creates tension in our meetings. If you have feedback about my work, I'd appreciate you sharing it with me privately so we can address any concerns that you have constructively." Notice a few things. I'm not accusing her of being passive-aggressive or trying to hurt me. I'm simply describing the impact of her behavior and asking for what I need. As an added bonus, by addressing this with her directly, now she knows that I know what she's doing, which ideally will make it harder for her to pull her irritating passive-aggressive routine on me the next time. Here are some other passive-aggressive behaviors and how to respond to them. For the silent treatment, you could say, "I notice you haven't responded to my last 3 emails about the project deadline. Can you please let me know your thoughts by tomorrow so we can move forward?" Or if someone gives you a backhanded compliment like, "That's such an interesting approach. I would never do it that way, but I guess it works for you." Your response could be, "Thanks, and yeah, it does work for me. I'm always open to hearing other approaches if you have suggestions." Or for the chronic forgetter, you could say, "I'm seeing a pattern where important deadlines are being missed. Can we establish a system to ensure that nothing falls through the cracks?" Remember, you cannot control passive-aggressive people, but you can always control how you respond to them. Stay professional. Don't take their irritatingly tempting bait and address problematic behavior directly when necessary. So here's your third practical kindness strategy of the episode. Identify any passive-aggressive behavior you're currently dealing with. This week, practice not taking the bait. And when someone makes a sarcastic comment or gives you a backhanded compliment, try the I don't get it response, or positive reframing. Notice how differently the interaction goes when you don't give them the emotional reaction that they're craving. My friend, we've covered 3 powerful strategies for dealing with workplace agitators. The first one was to know when to accept versus when to act. Save your energy for battles that are actually worth your energy and practice true acceptance for things beyond your control. Second, master assertive communication. Use the 2-step model to address problematic behavior. First step, remember, state the facts clearly. And second, make specific requests for change. And third, refuse to take the passive aggressive bait. Stay calm, stay factual and professional when dealing with indirect aggression, and address patterns of behavior directly whenever needed. Here's what I want you to remember. Dealing with agitators isn't about changing them. It's about maintaining your own peace and professionalism while protecting your ability to do great work. You cannot control other people's behavior, but you have complete control over your response. When you master these skills, you can become someone who can handle any workplace personality with grace and with effectiveness. Start small this week. Pick one agitating behavior that you're dealing with and apply the appropriate strategy. Notice how much more empowered you feel when you have a plan instead of just hoping the problem will go away on its own. Most of all, remember that you have more power than you think, even when you're dealing with extremely difficult people. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask of you. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.